I started out as a painter, and when I went to grad school, I went down to Savannah and nobody knew me there, and that was kind of liberating. And I was making paintings that dealt with sexuality and gender identity, and I realized when I was painting it, it was more of an illustration rather than getting to the meat of the conversation. I wanted something that was more tactile. I already knew how to crochet, taught myself while in grad school how to knit, and then I later learned how to needle tat. And I started using these weavings to create installation art. In a way, they're like these soft walls we put up ourselves or other people put to block themselves out. A lot of it is incorporating scraps of fabric and acrylic paint. I think about it in terms of abstract paintings where you lay down a brush stroke and then you're reacting to that brush stroke and then you're constantly adjusting what you're doing based on what you've already created. And so it's kind of a mixture of painting and collage. I almost never have an idea of how large something's going to be, but it usually starts with a center hole and a color palette. But at any point, I'm ready to deviate from there and let it take me in whatever direction it wants to go. A lot of them have this center hole. And I joke, in the beginning, it was like a glory hole. There were times, especially in my dating life, where I felt like I was not treated as a human. I was just treated as this walking receptacle. But then that imagery of the hole evolved to it being a vulva or a mouth or a peephole. I've tried to make a few that were closed and didn't have a hole, and they felt very heavy and almost suffocating. So it's also just this space for energy to flow through. I think a lot about consent and how these pieces are sort of anthropomorphized and they have their own personalities and they are people. You want to touch, but the point is that you can't touch them. They did not consent to be touched. As a female presenting person, we deal a lot with unwanted advances or touch, and consent is not discussed enough. And sometimes if you ask, I'll let you, because then there's consent involved. There were a few pieces where I really wanted to embrace the abject, gross texture of adding resin and glue and paint. And that was kind of an empowering thing for me. Again, as a female presenting person, there's this expectation of beauty. And if I can create something beautiful, but then take it away and undermine it, and I'm making it ugly, I'm telling you no, you're not allowed to have this beautiful thing. It's just a weird power play, and it gives me more ownership over the process. I really like patterned fabrics and painting on them and intervening and collaging and creating a depth that could exist beyond the surface that goes deeper. And that is a metaphor for your psychological well-being and mental health. I asked Daniela how long it took to make this piece, and she laughs. I hate that question, she says, but don't feel bad. No, everyone asks that. It's not really the part I'm interested in. It's more about the emotional dedication to her loved one. The process holds the meaning. Grief is a destroyer. It cuts open the world and scrambles the insides. It rearranges atoms. And what are you going to do? Sit in the rubble forever? No, you arrange the world again. You find some order that you can live with. And nobody asks you, oh, how long did it take you to claw some kind of intolerable existence together? They're just grateful you did. The process holds the meaning. I've been seeing Jessie all this time, but now I see Daniela. She is everywhere and nowhere here. There's as much of her in these works as Jessie. Her memories, her courage, her vulnerability, her fear, her humor. This work is a reminder of his life and hers. I see her in superposition. The Daniela that lost, grieved, and made this work, and the Daniela that loved Jesse, built a life with him, constructed a world that would be unbearably painful to lose. My partner suffered a traumatic brain injury in 2019, and then he survived in a minimally conscious state for a year and a half and died in July of 2020. It feels like it's been a million years and also yesterday at the same time. I made a whole body of work dedicated to his passing and that traumatic experience we both had. Making that body of work gave me something to live for and look forward to. Because he died at like the height of the pandemic, there was no funeral or memorial service. And I didn't realize how important those rituals are until you're not allowed to have one. The name of the exhibition was There Were No Casseroles. And it was kind of like a joke that I was talking to the curator, you know, and made it like an offhanded comment about that. And he's like, that's a good title. Because there wasn't any kind of funeral or repast or like celebration or mourning or, you know, like shared meal. The main woven installation is titled You, Me, and Jesse's Ghost. That was like an invitation to the viewer into my grief and process. You know, assertively addressed like you that's standing right in front of this. And then me, the artist, and then Jesse's lingering spirit. I'm mourning a future that I don't have, and I'm trying to figure out the future I want now after this loss. But after that show, it's been difficult to go back to making what I was making before. I think I'll always kind of carry that grief and sadness with me. I don't know if it's going to be apparent in the work or not, or if it's just something that I feel while making.